Hi villagers. Today I am interviewing a very old uni friend. He's not old, but I have known him a long time. David was a mature student when I met him, which basically meant he was over 21 and I was 18. I think he was about 24. He styles himself as my adopted big brother because I am the eldest of 3 children and don't have a big brother, so he decided he was going to self-style himself. David is about to start a master's degree in creative writing. He has written several novels. I have them, so I'll be wafting them about later on. And he's self-published, and he's hopeful that by the end of a master's degree, he may well be able to not self-publish, but be published by an agency or a publishing house. He has an eye condition that he's had for a long time and it's got progressively worse. So he won't be appearing on camera. I will put at the bottom of the screen the word that he has because I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, but it basically means his eyes flicker side to side. And as such, he thought it might be a distraction for you to sit and watch him for probably upwards of 40 minutes onwards because his eyes will be all over the place and he can't control it. It's an involuntary thing. He's tried doing some YouTubing of his own and decided that perhaps he isn't designed for front-facing cameras. So as such, he has a YouTube channel of his own, which I will include in the links in the description. He has a very different genre of book reading and writing than me. And as such, his YouTube channel is full of sort of murder mystery and crime fiction, which frankly doesn't appeal to me at all. But I am subscribed to his channel because he is my friend. So you will find all the links to David, his books and the YouTube stuff in the description below. And hopefully you will enjoy seeing the picture of him, which I'm going to post over the top of the interview and that we will be filming at a later stage this morning. Hopefully it'll all work well and you will enjoy this little chat with David, who is my adopted big brother, as I say. So we'll see what he has to say about his life journey and what his memoir would be called. Enjoy. Hi, David. Welcome to the village.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And how are you feeling about your interview?
Okay.
Good.
Haven't been interviewed for a while, so it might be a bit rusty, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Good. Well, as far as people interviewing you goes, your adopted little sister's probably the best place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, that's drunk the coffee. We'll see how far we get with the questions. I have a pile of your books underneath the laptop on my stool that I've got it all propped up against. So we will...
That's a relief. For a second I thought you were saying you were sitting on them. I thought, well, that's one useful...
No, I'm not sitting on them. No, they are a good size, but they're not going to do much for my 5'2" height, are they? So, would you like to start by telling my subscribers and my viewers how we met and what your first thought of me was?
Well, that's an interesting one because I actually remember very clearly. We met at Thames Valley University back in 1995.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm hoping that's not going to give your age away.
It's all right. I tell them on a regular basis how old I am.
We were actually standing outside the history theatre, waiting for a lecture, and it was sort of like one of the first lectures that we had, and I was looking round, seeing who people were, and I just kind of spotted you. You were standing against the wall, you were clutching a folder, you were wearing one of those 1990s, not Paddington type hats, but velvet hats, and you were just sort of like clutching it and looking wistfully. I thought, okay, have a chat with this person. I wouldn't say you were looking lost, but it was wistfully interesting. So came over and I believe I said hello, and then we just started chatting, and it kind of went from there. And,
it did, didn't it? We did very well out of we were in geography together as well in our first year, and we did really well out of the computer suite breaking, because you had the game that we were using to build with, a very old now edition of SimCity.
Yes.
And you had it, so a group of us came to your house for pizza and to have a go at SimCity, because the computers decided in the university that they wanted to die that day. So you piped up with, well, come round to my house, I've got it at home, we can all have a go.
Yeah, that's right. But I heard that we were going to be using it, so I literally hunted out an old version so as I could hopefully get ahead of the game. I believe the project, because when I told people that we were using SimCity, we were playing computer games in geography at uni, there was some raised eyebrows. But then I explained to them what it was it was looking at the idea of how cities grow, urbanization, and how cities grow, what they actually needed as they grew, how the population behaved. So
it's very accurate. I suspect if we went back and used that piece of software now, it would feel like using Duplo rather than the engineering level of Lego. But I haven't actually had to play it for a really long time.
I guess the updated version would probably be Minecraft.
Probably. And if you found out your child was using Minecraft in their geography degree, you'd raise your eyebrows too, probably.
Well, providing they weren't just building Dungeons and Dragon type labyrinths and fighting dragons.
Yeah, I don't understand Minecraft. The couple of times I've seen it played, the person just stands in a hole and digs stuff.
Yeah, I've steered clear well of it. We thought about getting a version to give it a go because everyone was doing it, and it looked kind of fun, but I just never got around to it.
You have to put in a lot of hours to make it worth anything, I think, with a lot of these games, don't you? Okay, let's start with your potted life history. I've already explained in the introduction that you were a mature student when I met you, which basically means you were over 21 when the rest of us were 18.
Yeah.
What did you do before you started at Thames Valley?
Well, directly before Thames Valley and kind of during Thames Valley, I was actually working at Debenhams. I was working at Debenhams in Harrow. I was working there full-time. I started off on the lighting department, and then they moved me over to the sports department. But it was about the same time that I decided I wanted to go back to uni. The dream then was to become a history teacher or work in history. And so I ended up going part-time at Debenhams while I was at uni.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, I've moved up. I've been in London about 2 years. Before then, I was based in Yeovil in Somerset.
Mm-hmm. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a little boy?
I love the way you do grow up in inverted commas.
Well, I'm still waiting to find out what I want to be when I grow up, and I'm 46. So
yeah, I still say that to people, and it raises them. They start laughing, and I go, "No, I really don't know what I want to do when I grow up."
I had this conversation with my niece over the summer, last summer, I think. We were talking about how, when do you start to feel like a grown-up? And I don't feel I look my age. I don't feel I look comparable with some of the kids I went to school with, but it's because they had children early, and I was 33 before I had Charlotte. And I think something about having children later doesn't age you as fast. I don't know. It's probably very insulting, but we'll stick with that. But I looked at my niece, who was about 8, and said, "Do you think I look like a grown-up, Jasmine?" And she looked at me like I had 3 heads, and said, "Yes, obvious. Of course you do, Auntie Tamsin. Don't be so silly."
Yeah, I mean, it's such a strange concept. I mean, there's a commercial that I make fun of. It's about this lady phoning up for life cover, and they say, "Oh, how old are you?" And she says, "I'm 50 years old," and she looks about 75.
Oh.
And the thing is, you don't kind of notice as you go along.
No.
Particularly when you, if you move away or you don't see people for some time, your mind is kind of fixed. As to what they look like when you left, and then years pass and you bump into them or you see updated photos of them. And of course it's very scary with kids when they suddenly say, "Oh, they're off to uni now," and you have that mental image of them sort of like at first day at school, standing on the steps.
Yeah.
I think there was the whole range of normal adolescent things that you wanted to be. But it's quite funny because I was looking back from old papers. It was one of those, what did I want to do when I was older? And it was write novels and buy and sell collectibles.
Which is what you're doing. Hurrah!
Yeah. It's just a shame I didn't be a millionaire onto the bottom of it. But yeah. So
you'll just have to update your goals then, won't you?
Yeah. I mean, technically I've got both boxes ticked, but as I say, the success is variable.
Okay, on a slightly tangent note, I know you only have one daughter, because I have known you a really long time, as we have said. How long have you been married? You've been married longer than me, haven't you?
Yeah, I think just over 20 years.
Yeah, we did our 20 years this summer.
Yeah.
Because I went to David's wedding, everybody. And he got married in one of these tiny, tiny little places where you could only have about 8 people as a venue, and in a parkland. And then we all went round to the church that they went to see them walk in together, because obviously they were married at that point. So that was quite nice. They sort of rushed.
And it was really awkward because, of course, at that time you'd got together with the person you were going to marry.
Yes.
And because we were so limited, it was a case of, "I'm really, really sorry. Would you mind waiting in the car?" And it was like, that just felt so bad. But I mean,
it's one of those things, isn't it? So. Yeah. Well, it is what it is. He was fine with being sat in the car.
Yes, thank goodness.
Do you have... Actually, where did you meet Joe?
It was actually through... We were both Cub Scouts in London, Cub Scout leaders in London.
Yeah.
Because of the various crossover with events, we were at different packs. We were aware of each other, but we never ended up kind of like crossing over. And then, eventually moving around packs, ended up together, working together, and then it grew from there.
Huh? I remember the first time I met Joe, because you were not the only male friend of mine who'd recently got a new girlfriend, and I spent about a week meeting all the new girlfriends. And I remember meeting Joe at the Eros statue in Piccadilly, and calling her by the wrong male girlfriend's name. And she looked at me and went, "No, I'm Joe." And I very quickly twigged what I'd done, and had to explain that David doesn't have a second girlfriend that I was expecting to meet. I have another male friend whose girlfriend I've met or about to meet this week. So, it's a tricky business having all these male friends, because you've got to keep all their girlfriends straight.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you like to do in your free time, David?
Free time? Reading, doing nerdy stuff. I love going to science fiction conventions, but I haven't been able to get to one for a while. I love old films, really old, trashy sci-fi, B-rated horror films. The worse, the better. There's one called House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price, and they have a skeleton, and you can literally see it being moved in the strings like a puppet. And the type of look at this, look at that giant lizard, and it just literally is a tortoise where they put little spikes on top.
So appalling production quality is your bag then?
Yeah, but bearing in mind the time that it was, we're talking 50s and B movies, and yeah.
Righto. How did you end up self-publishing your book?
Okay, it basically resolved. Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah, the piece of custard and the game books. Thank you for the plug. How did I start? Well, basically, I decided I'd always been writing in one form or another, so I always wanted to write and be published.
Right.
I settled on eventually saying, right, I'm going to do a story about the Titanic. So the book was written, and I went round about 43 different publishers and agents.
Wow.
And they showed pretty much no interest whatsoever. There was one where I actually got my foot through the door very slightly, sent them a copy, they read it, and then they decided that they didn't want to go ahead with it. And it was kind of like, if we don't do it ourselves, I'm not going to get it published. So then it was a case of looking around, finding a suitable printer, which we did, a company called CPI Anthony Rowe, who's actually based down here in Wiltshire. And they published it, we ordered the copies, and then it kind of went from there.
I will post a link to your Amazon profile page, which has all your books on it.
Brilliant, thank you.
I noticed that most of the Kindle ones range between 80p and 99p. So, you know, at the end of the day, viewers, the ones, especially those who are in America who don't have access to amazon.co.uk, you'll have to look him up on amazon.com, but I expect he'll be there as well. So, let's do some quick wins.
Okay.
Where would you travel to if money was no object?
I'd like to go to Japan.
Oh, take Charlotte. She wants to go there. It's not on my bucket list at all.
Really?
Yeah. Why? Why do you want to go to Japan?
It's just because it's such a different culture. Such a different culture, such a different history from the West. The attitudes are different. And also the advanced technology, again linking into the whole sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
Because they are, I mean, what they have in their shops and the technology that's available is just so far ahead than what we have here at the moment. It seems to almost start in Japan and then filters back to us.
When we were small, it was the other way around, wasn't it? It started in the USA and filtered over to us from the opposite side. What job would you have been terrible at?
Bank clerk, working in a bank.
You worked for the
Which
Australian...
coincidentally was actually one of my first jobs. I was on a YTS at Barclays Bank,
Oh, right.
and I just never got to grips with it. I mean, obviously there's the whole issue with my eyes and using computers and having to process information quickly. But yeah, I don't think that, and also the way banks change has changed. I mean, I was told that you go into we're talking back in the 80s, you go into the bank, you have a job for life, and that's simply not true now. So
no.
So
I thought of a question then, but it's disappeared. Oh, how did you end up at Australia House?
Oh, well, I started. I did a postgraduate course in modern history, and afterwards, I was just literally looking around and saying, "I've got to get a job." I've been studying for quite a time. I was getting study fatigue, certainly wallet fatigue.
Definitely.
So I was just literally looking around in the Evening Standard and papers for jobs, and I saw the job advertised for Australia House.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking 1999, and the reason they had such a big recruitment drive and was taking on so many people was because 2000 was the Australian Olympics, so they wanted extra people to process all the visas that were going through. So, and I applied, and fortunately, I was one of the lucky people that were chosen.
Has your eye condition worsened with age? Because presumably the passport type stuff would have been quite computer heavy.
Yes, very much so. This is the thing looking back now. Well, my eyes have definitely deteriorated over the past few years, but actually looking back at various things which have happened, I can see how it's deteriorated. And yes, some of the problems that I've got now, I certainly had back then. Misreading information, misinterpreting information. I've got this horrible little thing which sort of like micro blackouts because information people are moving. I'm kind of with the eye movement. I miss things and I'm trying to catch up in a way. So it makes the things that I've missed even worse. So yeah, looking back, all those things have been there through the stages of my life and jobs. And I've always struggled visually, but yeah, it's definitely got a lot worse over the past few years. Hence, I was actually registered visually impaired in 2021.
And you said you should have been before?
Yeah, looking back on it. I mean, there was a job that I did for the council with 2 computer screens looking at file information, and I just couldn't cope with it. I was getting constant headaches, and of course, glasses don't do anything for it, and I ended up not in that job for very long. Actually, that could have been the job that I would have been used to, apart from banking. But again, that was the big. Literally, I hate to say, that was the big eye opener, because from that point, because I basically lost that job because of my vision.
Yeah.
And then I was put onto the Nystagmus Society, and then they were saying, "Oh well, because you've got this, and this, you're liable to." And all these little things were kind of like falling into place. It was like, that's why I was so rubbish at sports at school, because I couldn't really see the ball properly. That's why when I was being taught things at school and the teacher was writing on the blackboard, I would suddenly miss out stages. So yeah, but it took a very long time for it all to be pieced together, and for them to recognise how bad things were, to get the formal diagnosis and registration to be visually impaired. So.
Is there anything they can do for it, or is it just a case of learning how to manage?
It's learning how to manage, basically. They have talked about Botox. The idea that if they put Botox into the side of the eye or the eye and the muscles, it would actually freeze it. But that's not very practical. I mean, the research, it's not very common at all. The people that have done it, they haven't done it for very long. You have to have it renewed every 10 to 12 weeks.
Oh.
So it's not very practical, and even if it was, it's very short term. So it's
like
and also the idea of them having to have regular appointments to stick needles literally into the side of my eyes.
Yeah, don't fancy that.
So I'm afraid I'm stuck with it, and it's going to get worse.
Right. Well, I guess if you know that, you can plan for that. If it creeps up on you,
I mean, as I say, so things like interviews like this, I'm not on camera. I've got 2 very large computer screens in front of me. We've got occasions where I need to quickly look things up with, like in the kitchen, or we've got magnifying glasses scattered all over the house, and it's just kind of like management. As in, I've got a splitting headache today because of my eyes. I know I'm not going to be able to do anything in the morning. So so it's just hoping that it doesn't get too worse.
Yeah. And is it both eyes?
Well, yes, it is. The operation that I had on my left eye started everything off. Now, I always thought my right eye was really good. But on examinations, they've said, yes, your right eye is moving as well. So it's not as noticeable, but it's noticeable.
Right. Does it feel like your eyes are moving to you, or is it just noticeable to other people?
Well, this is the thing. When I tell other people I've got the condition and what it is, they don't really notice it at all. If I'm looking at things for a long period of time, then I will start to notice it. There's this very weird thing that if I'm staring down at the floor, the pattern floor or the pavement, and I'm just staring at it, it starts to move and it looks like jelly.
Oh.
Again, that's the eye movement playing the trick on it.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at things in the far distance, really focusing on things in the far distance, it will start wobbling. And also, close-up work is very difficult as well. So.
So it's kind of like being dizzy all the time, then.
It can be, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, one trick I tend to do is close my eyes quite frequently, especially on car journeys. Joe will say, "Oh, did you see that?" And it's like, "No, because I got my eyes closed." Because again, I can't cope with looking out the window and seeing all the movement. Because of course, my eyes are moving, and we got the movements of the car as well. So.
Yeah, it must make you feel sick, I would imagine.
Yes, among other things.
Am I right in thinking you've never learnt to drive then?
No, again, before the fully diagnosis, when I was in London, and it was just a case of, oh, my eyes wobble a bit, just get on with things. I did try and learn to drive. I failed my driving test, I think it was about 5 times.
Oh, bless you.
And looking back on it, all the things I failed for were undue hesitation, distances. Again, when you're driving, you look, you can see the car instantly. I was looking, I was having to hold my head for a couple of extra seconds to work out where it was. So, I mean, bizarrely enough, as far as I can remember, all my manoeuvres, reversing around a corner, the 3-point turn, all those kind of things, never failed on. I was brilliant on. It was just the driving in a straight line, which is difficult to do when your eyes are wobbling.
That is true. Yes, if you were dizzy, you wouldn't drive the car. So I suppose it's the same sort of idea, isn't it?
But this is the crazy thing, because it doesn't actually recognise my condition. The eye test at the moment, you have to read a number plate with or without glasses at 20 metres. And I can actually read a number plate. If I focus and I lean forward, I can just about make it out. I can get the number plate pretty much correctly, which would qualify me to be on the roads. But no one would really want me on the roads.
No, that's really quite scary, isn't it? That there could be more of you out there all driving cars.
An absolute disaster.
Yeah. How common a condition is it?
It's not that common. The way I acquired it is very odd. Normally you get it through forced trauma, like an accident, a head injury.
It can be genetic, can't it?
No, sorry?
It can be genetic.
Possibly, yeah, on some occasions. But as far as from the history that we pieced together, I actually got it through an eye operation when I was 5 years old.
Oh.
I had a squint, so my left eye was looking off slightly. And it was pointed out that the kids at school were making fun of me. I was having to sit at the front of the class. And so the consultant very kindly said, "We'll sort that out for you, don't worry, we'll have an eye operation." So I had the eye operation, so my eye was moved, so it was looking straight ahead. The problem was, we've been told that it happened too late. So my brain is hardwired to looking out to the side.
Right.
So I've got this constant, the eye muscles are pulling my eye to the middle, and the brain is saying, no, your eyes should be looking out to the side.
Right.
So it moves them to the side, and my eyes move back to the middle because of the muscles. Then the brain takes over.
So it's a constant battle.
Yeah. So I've had that kind of like constant brain-eye muscle interaction since I was 5 years old. It's not very It's not very fun. I really don't recommend it.
No, I don't think anybody would recommend it by the sound of it. Right, well, let's move on to slightly lighter topics then, shall we, for a minute? Imagine you are standing at an ice cream shop. What flavour are you buying?
It's got to be either coffee, cappuccino, latte, those kind of things. I absolutely love the coffee flavours. I actually had a piece of good news this morning, because one thing that's been absolutely devastating over the years they've taken coffee creams out of everything. And Amelia was jumping up and down and saying, Daddy, Daddy, they put coffee creams are coming back into Quality Street this year. So it's like, right,
Stock
really,
up.
that's going to be the chocolate of choice.
Right, stock up. There we go.
Yes.
Okay. If you could time travel, where would you go?
Oh, I don't think the universe would allow me to time travel because I'm afraid as much as I could do so much good, like the old go back in time and so, I probably would misuse it a bit. I mean, one thing, and this sounds really terrible, I would love to take some old style money back to the 70s and the 80s and buy, all the old comics and toys. Not necessarily because they're going to be valuable, but the idea that you can't get them now, and I didn't have them at the time. So yeah, there would be there's that selfish element. I hate to be the common one. I really would like to go back to Dallas, November the 23rd, to actually see what happened with the JFK assassination.
Funny you should mention that. On my Instagram feed this morning, the New York Times was talking about a guy who was a member of the Secret Service is about to release a memoir at the beginning of October, and he is finally speaking after 60 years of silence. And the very short snippet that I'd read basically said he's always believed there was more than one shooter.
Well, the most popular and the most two credible theories that I ever heard, and I'm not sure if this was related to the guy's memoir, there technically would be if it's what I think it is. It was actually killed by the security guard in the back car.
Yes, I've heard that somewhere. You probably.
Yeah, what I've actually heard was the shot went off from Lee Harvey Oswald, and in the confusion, the security guard pulled the gun out, looked around, and it went off. And of course, because he was behind JFK, that's unfortunately where the bullet went. And if you actually look at the footage, you see JFK going straight forward. And the thing was, Lee Harvey Oswald is actually on record as saying that he didn't shoot Kennedy; he was a patsy. So going by that, he knew that his bullet didn't kill JFK.
But he intended to, presumably.
I'm presuming so, yes. And again, there's another thing, interesting thing about that, because they talk about how many shots were fired. Now, I can't remember. I think people say that 3 or 4 shots were fired. But there's a theory that I saw which is quite plausible. But one shot was fired from Lee Harvey Oswald after he had actually shot into the car. He shot once, shot again, and there was a shot very quickly afterwards. And apparently what they reckon was that shot was actually the sound of the bullet hitting one of the overhead traffic lights. So again, that was him saying he knew how many shots he fired. He knew that one didn't hit. So it's the idea he fired, hit the traffic light, and people are taking that as 2 shots.
Right.
But again, I think this is something that's going to be discussed and debated. Even if they come up with the correct answer, there's still going to be the theorists saying there was someone on the grassy knoll. It was some other method.
At the end of the day, he was a very popular fellow until he wasn't, and that's why they did well. As is all these things, if you do a really good job at it, somebody wants you dead.
Yes.
Well, on that happy note, we're about to run out of time on our Zoom call, so we better find a way of wrapping ourselves up.
Okay.
So thank you very much for joining me, David, and I will post links to David's book, all the Amazon links, and if I can find out what this fellow was called, I will send a link to you and post it with this video to this security fellow, to anybody else who has either an American interest or a historical interest, because that's why David and I are friends. The week we did in our history class for feminism, women and history, I took copious notes and David copied my notes. And the week we did World War II, which is one of David's specialisms, he wrote excellent notes and I nearly fell asleep, so I had to borrow his notes. So this is why we are friends, because we are very polar opposites when it comes to books and clearly movies, because there's no way I'd be watching anything crime, horror, or anything in that category.
You must have watched Lord of the Rings.
I have watched some of those because it's one of Nick's favourites. So
you have to watch all of it.
I think I have. We worked on a principle. He had to watch all of the Anna Green Gables books and films, and I had to watch all the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits. So we had to have a his and hers for a bit. So thank you very much for joining me, David. Is there anything else you want to say quick before our timer runs out?
No, I think we've covered everything, but thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I will see you soon.